You all know how that goes. So just give us one moment to make sure that you are able to see the presentation for this evening. Okay. So welcome to all the sisters out there, whether you are here with us on Zoom, whether you're on Facebook, or you're watching this on YouTube. We are living our life like it's golden. We are talking about support, sisterhood, and how we are shining in our lives. And so I'm so grateful that Rhonda was able to share my bio with you all, but I want to really focus on the talk for today. We want to understand what untreated mental health concerns are and how they can disrupt families, our careers, and even lead to early death. We're going to go over how mental, physical, and spiritual health truly is total health and how we have to be intentional about making time and balancing each aspect of our lives. We'll go over what intergenerational trauma is and epigenetics, but also talk about adverse and positive childhood experiences, because both are so important to our mental health. And then last but not least, we cannot move on as a people until we honor those who came before us. And so we'll also have the opportunity to pause for some of the wisdom from our ancestors. And most importantly to me, my whole brand is around faith and therapy. So wellness also begins with God. And so in the chat, I want to get to know you. So I want you to put your name, where you work. You know who I am. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. But I also want you to put, do you agree that how you are is as important as what you do? I'll give you a moment so I can get to know you. Okay, so for those of you who are watching us live, we're getting some responses in. Many say yes, their job doesn't define them. I can't see the Facebook live stream or the YouTube, so we're just going to say thank you all for being here and posting who you are, what you do, and if you know that how you are is as important as what you do, because sometimes we're so busy trying to get to what we do that we forget to pause along the way to focus on how are we doing it, but also how are we feeling. And so how are we? Let's talk about the facts on mental health in the workplace. Our workplace definitely plays a significant role in our life. It affects our physical and mental well-being. 76% of US workers report at least one symptom of mental health. 81% of workers reported that they actually would be looking for workplaces that support mental health in the future, because they realize if they don't have peace, if they don't have a sense of purpose and joy, that they will get burnt out. And no matter what the title or role, it is not worth their mental health. And so we actually can build workplaces that are engines of well-being, showing employees that they matter, that our work matters, and that we have workplaces and resources and supports that can help us flourish. When we look at mental health in America overall, I want you to know that mental health concerns are actually very, very quite common. 1 in 5 American adults experience a mental health issue. 1 in 10 young people, so that would be our teens and children, experience periods of major depression. 1 in 25 Americans actually live with a serious mental illness, such as schizophrenia, bipolar, or major depression. And guess what, sisters? They can still go to work. They can still be productive. They can still have a life that flourishes. They can get married. They can do all the things that we think, oh, that's not normal. No, They may be at a different level, but they can still have a life that is satisfying to them. Another thing that I think is so important that people sometimes overlook or don't want to see is that suicide in America, unfortunately, is on the rise, and it is the 10th leading cause of death. It accounts for more than 42,000 American lives each year. That's actually higher than our homicide rate. So this is not just about us talking about it. This is also about us saving lives, becoming aware of what suicide is, how people can feel like they are a burden, they feel like they're hopeless, and thus choose death by suicide. So I want you to not only know the stats, but also share the stats. And when you think about how are we, know that this is also our role models too. Here are some of our sheroes that we look up to, some of our sisters that we look up to, who also battle depression. They have posted publicly online, they've given interviews to news outlets, because this is not an isolated concern. When you think of health, it is just as we know that we attune to our physical health when we see our primary care specialists, or to have our pearly whites, our beautiful smiles, we go to our dentist. They also share how important it is to have a therapist, to be able to talk to someone when they are going through the stress of life. So we've talked about our careers, we've talked about our community, and now we're talking about our spirituality. In our church, most Protestant senior pastors actually seldom speak to their congregation about mental illness, yet most pastors indicate that they personally know one or more people who have been diagnosed with clinical depression, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia. So this is our careers, this is our community, and this is our church. This is so serious that we have to come together to stop this cycle of shame and stigma. People with mental illness and their families feel a large amount of shame and stigma around mental illness. Sometimes people on the outside looking in assume the person has done something, when really we have to shift that, because it's not what's wrong, it's what has happened. When we can talk about what has happened, when we can have these honest conversations like we're having tonight with Rhonda's Promise, we can bring clarity to the topic. So let's have these conversations about mental illness at our workplace, at our homes, and in our churches. This is the single most important thing that we need to do today. And that is to have the courage to look this problem in the face and say that this is real and this is all of us. And this, who you see pictured here, is Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She is the leader in how we talk about adverse childhood experiences today. And I'll talk more about that in the upcoming slides. And her influence is incredible as a doctor. But I want you to also think about your different roles as a mother, as a wife, as a friend. Maybe some of you are teachers or a healer, a caregiver, a pastor. In all of those roles, and even as you saw earlier, our celebrities, mental health affect us all. And so the complexity of all these roles can cause ups and downs throughout life. And so thinking about when you are down, what is depression? Depression is a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way that you think, and how you act. Now, remember, the highlight here is that this is common, and depression can cause feelings of sadness, lots of interest in activities that you once enjoyed. And it's not about sadness in the sense that you have gone through something and you take a moment to recognize that you may be crying or you feel sadness, but this is sadness to the point where you can't function, where you feel like you can't get out of bed, where you feel like you'll never be able to do the things you loved again, You'll never be able to forgive again. You'll never be able to move forward in the way that you believe your life should be, where you are fully functioning and thriving. And so I want you to know all of the signs and symptoms of mental health, because it is about our mindset, it's about our physical body, and it's also about our emotions. And across all of these, there is new science called epigenetics. Epigenetics means that there is intergenerational trauma that medical professionals can now see at the epigenome level. And so it is so important that we take the time to recognize our mental health and heal from it, to know the signs so we can pay attention to what is going on with our mind, our emotions, and even our physical body. So if you are having feelings of emptiness, hopelessness, despair, or sadness, if you hear your children talking about this, feeling irritable or anxious, overly guilty or stuck in shame, if you begin having feelings of being exhausted, severe tiredness, a loss of interest in things that were previously pleasurable to you, but you no longer feel like you want to engage, thinking about suicide or even attempts of suicide. If your sleep becomes too much or too little, you're experiencing insomnia. Those are things that you should say, you know what? I need to see my therapist. I have my primary care. I have my dentist. I know my specialist. Who is my therapist? I also want you to be mindful that sometimes we will bypass what's going on in our mind, and it comes out somatically. So that means physically, where you can start having these aches and pains, and you didn't go through something serious that would cause it, but you're feeling it and you're wondering, like, where is this coming from? You may also experiencing cramps. Now, these are not our monthly ones. These would be, again, out of the norm. Even headaches, digestive issues, feeling tenderness in the breast, having a lack of energy. All of these things, when they are to the extreme where you can't function, where you are pushing yourself so much, but your body is breaking down, that is a clear sign, and those are clear symptoms that you need mental health care. The last one we're going to go over is our emotional signs and symptoms. And sometimes you can be feeling like you are completely out of control. Everyone starts saying, are you okay, sister? Like, you having mood swings. You might be crying uncontrollably one night and wondering, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get this together? You may even be experiencing panic attacks where you feel like you can't breathe. These are things that are red flags that you need to take a break and pause and assess your mental well-being. And when you do that, it's also time to go deeper. So this is what I was sharing with you earlier, that Nadine Burke-Harris has brought so much light to. And this is the Adverse Childhood Experiences Pyramid. And so you see a shorter one where adverse childhood experiences is in blue on the bottom. This was the initial research that says that if we don't address what happened to us in childhood, it leads to social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, adoption of health risk behaviors, disease, disability, and social problems. But the one we want to prevent for everyone is 20 years less of life. Can you imagine that right now? Think about your life, whatever age you are, and if you don't address your adverse childhood experiences, what is going on at the epigenome level due to epigenetics, meaning trauma coming from the sperm and the egg, passed on to the child, and then passed on generation after generation. And so when we think about our sisters, when we think about our ancestors and the historical trauma that has happened in America, when was the time that we had to pause and heal? When was the time that our ancestors had the time to pause and heal? We know there were no therapists back then for us. There was no care. And so now that we have the access, the support, the knowledge, the resources, we have to use it. And we also have to recognize the social conditions that we live in and the local context. What's going on where we are that impacts our mental health? Because then when we do this, we include microaggressions that impact us, implicit bias, and we change the terms from just being adverse childhood to experiences to complex trauma that we're trying to heal, that we're trying to understand, that sometimes we don't even know because some of our history was erased. And we look at it not as being impairment, but disrupted neurological development, that we have to reconnect, that we have to learn how to cope, that we have to get to where we look at this is not an identity problem. This is not a my or you problem, but this is a burden of disease that needs healing, that this is daily distress, that sometimes this can even be criminalization for people who don't understand what is going on in their mind or their body and who make certain choices that gets them in the wrong place that they don't want to be, where they have to then determine what's next for their life with a judge. We can actually decrease that when we understand what has happened. We have our diagnosis, we have our therapist, we're getting treatment and we're getting care. And most importantly, we are avoiding early death. And so ACEs are a game changer. Our sister Oprah says, unless you fix the trauma, the hole in the soul, where the wounds first started, working through all of the things that we think are wrong in our life, and recognizing that even Oprah shared her story of going through an adverse childhood experience, but also how she was able to thrive, her resiliency. And so that is the resiliency of sisterhood, the good outcomes in the face of adversity. Our sororities, our nonprofits that help us build community, taking time for, again, your mental, spiritual, and physical muscles so you can overcome obstacles and challenges. And I want you to know that this is no rush. We gain back those 20 years over time. And it's not just all on us, but it's us in partnership with Rhonda's Promise. It's us in partnership with each other, healing our families, reconciling, setting boundaries, and moving on. And this is where we also take time for our positive childhood experiences. So I created this model because I began to see that, yes, we're talking about the trauma, we're talking about the adverse childhood experiences, but what about the good? What about those experiences and memories that bring us joy, that bring us happiness, that help us get up in the morning and move forward? And so that would be our family, our ancestors, that social support. That would be including your social, emotional, physical, and spiritual wellness. That would be including activities and organizations that help fuel your healthy brain development and all of your executive functioning. So that way you can get to the healing that you seek. You can manage stress in a healthy way. You can find congruence or balance in your life. And instead of worrying about what will happen tomorrow, will you have an early death, you are focused on a whole life. And to do that, I took a little time to go deeper as well. And I said, you know what? Just a little bit of love. If you have just a little bit of love, you can make it to each step. You can make it through each day. You can find that balance. You can find that peace. You can differentiate yourself find your identity, find your purpose, find your calling, understand what are positive and healthy relationships, that who are those people who you determine have access to you, and who you determine, no, I need to set boundaries because I want a whole and peaceful life. So as you think about what happened in your childhood, think about the love, think about grandma's prayers, think about your mom or dad or your caregivers, the people who had a positive influence. For Oprah, it was one teacher that believed in her and helped her to keep going. So she is the superstar that we know today. And so I want you to know that protective factors are intergenerational too, and you can create pathways to healing. When you don't keep your feelings bottled up and you find a support group with people that you trust, like Rhonda's Promise, when you stay engaged in social activities and social functions, that can be with sororities or the National Council of Black Women. Sisters, we got to exercise regularly. You got to keep it right, keep it tight, for yourself, and drink your water. We got to stay hydrated. Sometimes we're just going. We might grab coffee, we might grab tea, but it's so important to refresh our bodies in the morning, at night with water. It's so essential. And as you take time to incorporate these things, I want you to also make sure you check in with, how is your sleep? What are your sleep patterns? Sometimes we have goals in life where we want to reach this next role, we want to reach this next title, but it is so important for us to get sleep so we can get there and then actually enjoy it when we're there, instead of constantly rushing, cutting off sleep and thinking that we're missing out on something. You are not. If you lead with knowing that each person has a purpose in this world, that you are a specific piece in the puzzle of the world, then you know that, hey, if I'm not at my best, then I'm actually missing. If I'm not at my best, the plan that God has for me actually means that in some way, I'm missing out on helping others. So we need you. We need you to figure out what will be your coping strategies. What will be your routine, whether that's meditation, whether that's trying yoga or other relaxation techniques. And most importantly, we need you to know, who is your therapist? Now, I'm biased. So as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I always say, please find a family therapist, but you find who works for you, whether that is a coach, whether that is a psychologist, or if you have a chemical imbalance and you need to see a psychiatrist so they can prescribe medication to help get you back in balance. As we continue, I just want to pause, and if you feel comfortable putting in the chat, thinking about how ACEs, intergenerational trauma, and also PACEs or resiliency has affected you, and how also your actions may cause ACEs or even PACEs, those positive childhood experiences in someone else's life. So I'm going to let you do that for a moment so we can open it up and make this a dialogue. I'm going to ask if Rhonda could check the chat or our Facebook and just let me know some of the feedback, what you recognize now that you know what PACEs are, now that you know what ACEs are, now that you know what epigenetics is. Maybe you've seen it in your life, maybe you've seen it in a friend's life, and you can call it in. So we share this not to call out or to put anything on blast. No, we share it to keep the conversation honest, to keep the conversation open so that we can heal collectively.
Yeah, one of the sisters added about boundaries, and I totally agree. Setting boundaries has always been an issue for me. And it's the same thing with me. We still have those superwoman things that we feel like we have to be doing everything at all times. So setting boundaries has definitely been an issue.
Thank you. Thank you. So you've heard me share, that is an excellent way to reset your mind and reset your life. When you determine who has access to you, you start at enough and are so worthy that for people to be able to text you, call you, Facebook you, Instagram you, you can determine, is it worth your reply? Do you have the time? Do you have the space in your mind to give this person essentially a part of yourself? And if at the end of the day, you determine, you know what? No, then guess what? No is your complete sentence. And you could even say, you know what? Maybe not right now. I don't have to immediately respond to this text. I can let them know, you know what? I'm busy right now, but I'll make sure I'll follow up with you in 2 days. I'll follow up with you when I have a moment. And knowing that that's okay, giving yourself permission to not be hurried or pressed, especially if it will disrupt your peace. Anything else before we move on?
Yep, we have 2 more comments. Bringing light to a lot of things that we call generational curses in our community.
Yes, yes. So let's go to that, because it's actually science catching up with the Bible. We know that the Bible has had this for centuries, teaching us the importance of what goes on in our family line. And so now science says, wait, we can actually see this at the epigenome level, how it is expressed. And so with this information, it's so important to share it and then find the solutions. And here on this slide, I have some solutions and interventions that could be helpful to all of us on our journey. Of course, I have marriage and family therapy first, but there are support groups like Rhonda's Promise, or finding a local group therapy that you feel comfortable with. Especially if you have family members with substance abuse issues. There are many local treatment centers that you can explore and determine if they're a best fit for your family or that person. There is EMDR or polyvagal therapy. There's narrative therapy, which helps you to rewrite a new story. And your therapist will actually walk with you on determining what does that look like to recognize what you've went through, but then how to rename it based on the truth that you may not see because you're stuck in the shame and the guilt. There's also different forms of meditation that you may be interested in, such as mindfulness-based stress reduction. If you want a little fun, or you want to find some therapies for your children or your teens, you might want to try play therapy. And yes, play therapy is also for adults. You can request sand tray or even different art therapy techniques, so you can awaken your creative side while you're really trying to heal a lot of deep hurt. And so I highly recommend play therapy, especially for our children, because sometimes they just don't have the language. And so through the therapeutic process of play, they're able to show what they're going through, how to process it, and how to release it in a way that is meaningful for them. Satir systemic transformational therapy is a strength-based therapy that is focused on your total transformation, but also looking at systemically what is going on in the community, in your patterns of behavior. You can also try cognitive behavioral therapy or trauma-focused CBT as well. And then you can also request dialectical behavioral therapy. So these are several that I encourage you to talk to a therapist about. See what they are. So I didn't want to give you the full definitions of each, because I'm putting it on you to now go out. And if you already have a therapist, say, hey, I was on Rhonda's Promise support group, and Coach Debbie said there's something called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. What is that? Would that be important to my healing process? And I see someone's hand, so I'll pause and check in.
Sister Aida, please feel free.
Okay, so I have a question. Now, you just gave us a whole list of different type of therapy that you can go to. What are your thoughts on having like a close friendship where you discuss all of your different issues versus going to a stranger to talk about some of your issues?
Mm-hmm. So
What is your thoughts on that?
Sure. And I love your question. Thank you so much for your question. In sisterhood, we go to our sisters first. And we have to recognize what boundaries do we set even with them. They may know you best, but is it best for them to know every trauma that you've gone through? Because then sometimes judgment can come in, guilt can come in. The next day you feeling like, oh my goodness, did I just emotionally throw up to my girl? And I don't want her to look at me different. I don't even want us to really talk about it anymore, but it's out there. So you have to think through, even when you're irritable, when you're frustrated, when you're upset, when you have anxiety, what comes next once you share this, especially with someone personal who may not have the level of skill or technique that a therapist is trained to support you in healing. And every therapy session is done in a confidential space where the focus is no harm, but on getting you to your goals. And so I think it's always very, very personal for you to determine, is this something that I just want to release and share with my best friend, with my sorority sister, or is this something that I've recognized has become a pattern that I need to stop and talk to a professional so I can see, where am I stuck and how do I get to the solution that I am desiring for, that I'm hoping for? But I feel like I've talked to my friends, I've talked to my family, and it's just still not working. Any other questions before we go to more solutions?
One other one was in the chat, and I'll let Sister Aida think about that if she has a follow-up question. But another question in the chat was, how did you rid yourself of the faulty thinking, guilt feelings that affects my no? So when you talk about being able to say no, they're asking, how do you get rid of that feeling of that thinking, the faulty thinking?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so negative thinking is very common. Our brains are incredible. Just like our heart is pumping, and even though we don't question, how to breathe, how to move forward, it's all automatic. It's the same with our thoughts. Our thoughts are constant. We have about 47,000 thoughts a day. Oh, I have to pick up my children. I have to get to work on time. Did I get my groceries? My child has a camp coming up, or some sport coming up, all these things. Did I check in with my husband? Was I supposed to call my mom back? Did I hear from my grandfather, my grandmother? All of these things go on throughout the day. And sometimes when there are unresolved things, then you have the other thoughts that pop up. You're not good enough. You can never do anything right. Why are you even trying? They're going to pick that other person. What are you talking about? That doesn't look good on you. That person is better than you. All these little things can come up that sometimes you're like, whoa, where did that come from? Oh, that's not my voice. That's not me. Like, what's going on? Or I've talked about this. How come I keep getting stuck with these negative thoughts? Mm-hmm. And so you have to take captive your thoughts. It is a skill. When you take captive your thoughts, you are letting your brain know, this is not how I think about this. I want to retrain this repetitive and automatic thought to be this truth. And sometimes it will be also talking with yourself to reset what you are thinking and what you are feeling. That can be encouraging yourself. That can be affirmations, looking in the mirror, reminding yourself that you are beautiful, that your life matters, that you have purpose. If you are a mother, that your children need you. If you are a wife, that your husband needs you. Because sometimes when you are feeling depressed, when you are feeling lost and alone, when you are feeling like you are burnt out, used, no one understands, those thoughts will come automatically, and you have to take them captive and reset them. And a way that you also can do that is through using bibliotherapy to build your resiliency, to build your relational and reflection skills. I have some books here that you may want to check out. My favorite is Soul Care and African American Practice by Dr. Barbara Peacock. She's an award-winning author who actually just released her second book, Spiritual Practices and Soul Care. And so I'll put that link for you in the chat as well. But this is what it takes to give ourselves self-care, to reset our mind, to develop a practice of mindfulness, being present and in the moment without judgment, building our self-awareness so we can cultivate self-regulation, knowing when we need to pause, take time for ourselves in silence, in solitude, and also in therapy, so we can get to the solutions that we hope. Any
I
other
know you're a
questions?
fan of it because
to
you
move
just
forward?
said therapy. So another one of our questions in the chat is, so many people see therapy as negative. How do we change that narrative, especially among Black people?
Yeah, thank you for all these amazing, amazing and thoughtful questions. So what I would say to that is, for the person who says, oh my goodness, like, why are you going to a therapist? Girl, what's wrong with you? Your answer should be, we see our primary care every year. When we get sick physically, we have the flu, we have a cold. When you had COVID and we were going through the pandemic, we still needed our doctor's support. It is the same for a mental health concern. Thinking about our emotions and our thinking, that is a part of who we are, and it needs care. And part of that care is also what God says in the Bible are our counselors, that there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. So it is so important for us to recognize that therapy is not negative, but it is a part of a life that thrives. We brought up Sister Oprah earlier. Guess what? Sister Oprah has 5 coaches because Sister Oprah knows she is doing a lot, and she has other goals even beyond having her network, her school in South Africa. She knows life is not over, that as long as she has breath in her lungs, there is so much more for her to do. And it's the same for you, but guess what? We can't do it on our own. We need that support, and we need the professionals who, just like our medical doctors who attend to our physical body, have gone through the necessary training, credentials, and licensure to be able to serve you. They are here for you, and everything that you share with them is confidential, because the purpose is to release it and to heal it and move on. And so another thing that you can use to support you on your journey, even while you're still thinking about, okay, I know I've had some mental health concerns, but I'm not sure yet who's best to talk to it. Narrative therapy is so helpful. Bibliotherapy is so helpful. And so I wanted to share this collection that I put together just for my sisters. This is my sisterhood collection. And so you'll see our other sister, Michelle Obama, here. You'll see many books from Renita Weems. I love her. You'll also see some from Iyanla Vanzant. Finding the person that speaks to you, reading the stories that represent your life, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and finding the support that you need. Check out some of these books from the Sisterhood collection. And one day we claim it, we're going to have Dr. Debbie's book on this collection too. And so as we recognize the time and we want to make sure we get to your time of self-care, we're going to talk about the physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, financial, and professional aspects of our lives. So when you leave from here tonight, you understand the domains of self-care and how to take time for yourself. And so there are 10 here. And each one that I go over, I just want you to check. You can do a mental check, or you can put in the chat how many you have, and how many you're working on. And just know if you have more than 6, that means you're in the middle or a balanced place, and you can determine, do I need to work more on my self-care, or do I feel comfortable where I am? So are you fostering relationships with friends, family, and loved ones? And so for this, I always say it's different for everyone, because some families are so close, they talk every day, they text every day, and they are always like, okay, I know what's going on. For others, they can say, okay, once a week or even once a month, that's enough. More than that is like, okay, that's too much. So thinking about what is a positive relationship with your friends, family, and loved ones. Do you spend time doing things in the community? Community service has been shown to be transformational to your mental health and wellness. Setting boundaries again, coming up with your relationships. Social support that is mostly used. What is that for you? What does it look like? Can you check and say, yeah, I have frequent social support that I trust and I find helpful. Emotional, do you know what positive coping skills are? Do you use them? Do you have a journaling routine, a meditation practice, a yoga practice? Have you tried mindfulness? Do you recognize, is your mood daily maintained in a way that exudes your joy, your heart, and your peace? So I want you to put in the chat where you are, so you know if you have more to work, or if you feel like, hey, all right, give myself a pat on the back, I'm doing pretty good. When we talk about the other domains of self-care, this is 7. So if you have 4, you know you're headed in the right direction. Physically, are you getting your sleep, your exercise? Do you have a balanced diet? And then professional, remember what we started with. How you are is just as important as what you do. So at work, are you setting those boundaries? So not just with people in your home and in the community, but even at work, letting them know, no, not today, not this time. We're going to email. So one, we have a record, but also we're going to set that appointment. We're not just going to come on in. We're going to have some boundaries. Are you going to trainings like this with Rodney's Promise? So you are building your brain development. So you are building up your opportunity to learn and to grow. Are you seeking supervision or mentors that can help you get you to where you want in terms of your goals and your work? And then are you advocating for yourself? Are you advocating with HR or your supervisor for a supportive work environment? And also, if you are the boss, if you are in the leadership role, how are you creating that supportive work environment, that positive workplace culture where people feel like they belong, like they're included, and that they wake up saying, I want to go to work, I want to contribute, I want to grow with this organization. And so we're going to pause to look at Vivek Murthy. He is our US Surgeon General. Dr. Murthy created this new plan for workplace mental health that I want you to take back with you. And I hope we have sound.
Can you hear, ladies? I know I cannot hear. Do we need to do something else for sound?
I can't hear now.
What about anyone else? Everybody else can hear?
No sound for me.
No sound for me.
Let me see if you can stop it, Coach Debbie. And let me see
I'm
if I
so
can
sorry,
find the sound.
everyone. So I will put this video in the chat for you. This is a public video, so you can watch it at any time. And I have the outline here for you, so no worries. I do love Dr. Murthy, but I understand some people were not able to hear, some could. And we want to value your time because we want to open up for questions. So I hope you can take this back for your workplace. Or if you own your own business, how you are growing your organization, centered on the voice of the worker, and equity? How are you making sure that there is time for your employees when they go home to have adequate rest? How are you normalizing support of mental health in the workplace? What is your attempt to operationalize DEI norms, policies, and programs? And how do you advocate for that to your human resources? Because that is what helps build this culture to protect employees from harm. Also advocating for connection and community, creating opportunities and spaces similar to what we're doing now, where we can foster collaboration and talking about topics that sometimes may be taboo. We can build trusted relationships, but also we can create a culture that normalizes inclusion and belonging. We want to make sure our workplaces have that work-life harmony. And so going to HR to advocate, is there opportunity for increased access to paid leave? What does it look like talking with your supervisor to have more autonomy over how the work is done? How can schedules become more flexible? There are so many different ways that people are doing work, whether it's work from home, whether it's a 980 schedule where you get every other Friday off. There are some people who have now adopted the medical model where they are working 3 days a week and they have 4 days off. So let's be creative in this work-life balance. As long as the work is getting done and you are fulfilling what you need to get paid, there are creative ways that we can work together. Most importantly, I want you to go back, and if you recognize this has not happened yet, especially with us going through the pandemic, making sure that you have a living wage or equitable wage where you are included in workplace decisions, even if you're not at a leadership role, but that your voice still is valued and included in the decisions that will affect you and affect your colleagues. And ultimately, in doing that, the workplace can build this culture of gratitude and recognition, because the goal is that growth, where people can take the opportunities that they've gained from serving and giving their all at work, from building their expertise, whether it is through training, whether it's support groups like we are all tonight here with Rhonda's Promise, whether you find a mentor. It doesn't matter how old you are, you always need a mentor that can support you in getting where you want to be next in life. Until you feel like you've arrived and you are in retirement, you know there is more that you can experience, that you can grow, that you can learn. And so I encourage you all to think about what does that look like for your career advancement and how you take this back to your workplace. And we were going to pause for a self-care activity, but I'm recognizing the time. And again, we wanted to have some time for questions. So I'm going to ask that you take a picture of this and you take this activity back with you, where you can look at what are your current practices of self-care and what are some new ways, what are some obstacles or barriers that might come up, and then you're planning ahead. What can you do to address them? And as we continue, I also want you to put in the chat, what are some new ways of self-care that you're gonna try, whether that is therapy, bibliotherapy, what's a good book that you wanna read? Are you gonna try some yoga, some mindfulness? I want you to put in the chat, what are some new ways that you're gonna try so you can uplift your spirit, uplift your way of being, your mindset, and become the sister that you always wanted to be, because there's always something positive that you can do. And from our ancestor, Maya Angelou, she encourages us to stand up straight and realize who you are, that you tower over your circumstances because you are a child of God. So if you are on screen with me, I just want you to roll your shoulders and stand up just a little straighter and remember who you are, because positive protective factors are also intergenerational too. And so those are the good things that have happened in childhood and throughout your life that helped you to determine how you want to change your life for the better. So with that, I want to say thank you all for being with me here today. I'm going to mute my mic so I can have a chance to hear your questions. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Coach Debbie and Dr. Debbie. You're both one and the same. I'm just so used to calling you Coach Debbie, but Dr. Debbie as well. Let's go to the chat and see what the ladies are saying. Reading some of the Sisterhood Collection books, that's one of the things that they're going to take away and do for themselves. Dr. Debbie, this was very informative. We love the content. Let me scroll up. I'm going to personally try some of that mindfulness. So I'm going to need you back to help us with that. And then the other item was therapy. Let me know, ladies, if I'm missing anything. Well, I truly want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us here tonight. We look forward to having you again as part of this program. Hey, sister, we are going to have a women's conference in the month of November, December, and I'd love to have you back for a face-to-face session as well. I want to thank our Vice President, Mrs. LaSonia Robinson, for bringing greetings and introducing you this morning, but before the session this evening. And I have to thank our sponsor, Mr. Ricky Petty in the Healthier Boynton Beach. They are a sponsor of the Hey Sister program. So I want to thank you and thank him and thank all the steering committees for voting for our proposal. And lastly, I have to thank the ladies that came on here and spent this 1 hour with us. And hopefully they took some great things away from this session. Was there anything else, ladies, you would like to see us do with the next session? You can drop it in the chat, as well as Coach Debbie, if you can also drop that video. I would like to share it out to our Facebook page for those who watched on Facebook, because I do believe we had about 5 or 6 watching us live on Facebook as well. So thank you so much for everything. And if there's nothing else, we will give you back your evening for some of that self-care. And thank you.